My teenage daughter had been looking forward to this visit for months. She was going to be hosting her pen pal from the Navy SEALs. He would finally get to meet the family he had only seen in photos and videos. But when her parents found out that she was expecting a 34-year-old man to stay at their house for 3 days, they weren't too happy about it. And by unhappy, I mean they went to the police to have her arrested. I didn't know anything about any of this until my daughter came home from school one day to find a police car waiting for her with her friends. No one told me what happened. All I saw was the cops put handcuffs on my baby girl, then put her in the back of the cruiser and drive her away. I raced outside to ask what happened, and the cop just said, "Sorry, ma'am. You'll have to go down to the station to find out." How does a cop just handcuff a kid and take them away without telling anyone anything? What did my baby girl do? I called my husband who works night shift, but he didn't answer his phone. So I got in my car and drove to the nearest precinct. When I walked through the door, I asked the woman behind the desk what was going on and why my daughter was here. The officer shook her head, saying she couldn't tell me because I wasn't the girl's parent. I told her that I was, and that her father was currently at work, but would be here as soon as possible. She responded by telling me to have a seat while she paged an officer to speak with me. About 15 minutes later, a gruff man in his late 30s walked up to me and introduced himself as the lead detective on my daughter's case. He sat me down and explained why my little girl was in trouble. Turns out that my nosy neighbor had called the police and claimed my daughter was being trafficked at our home. This neighbor had apparently seen the pictures my daughter had sent to her pen pal and somehow got a hold of them. I was furious. How could my neighbor see these pictures and assume my daughter is being trafficked? If anything, she should have reached out to us to discuss her concerns instead of calling the police. Then again, maybe she did call to try and talk to us about it, and we just missed the message. I tried to explain this to the officer, but he seemed convinced that my daughter was involved in some sort of illegal activity. He even implied that her online relationship with her pen pal was nothing more than a cover for something sinister. According to him, I needed to be interviewed to see if my daughter had been brainwashed into thinking that this 34-year-old man was her boyfriend. They took me into a separate room and asked me questions about my daughter's relationship with her pen pal. I told the officer that she met him when she was deployed and that they kept in touch through letters and video calls ever since. My daughter started writing to him when she was only 15 years old, and she's now 17. He was a year older than her when they first met, and she always made sure to bring up her age whenever they talked. He never pressured her or made her feel uncomfortable. But the more I spoke, the more it became clear that the officers didn't believe me. They were convinced that my daughter was being trafficked, even though she'd been open about everything with us. We knew about her pen pal, and we knew how old he was. I tried to tell the officer this, but he wouldn't listen. He kept asking me things like, "What did your daughter call you for?" Or "Did you know what she was doing with that man?" The way he was speaking to me was ridiculous. I don't think he would have treated a grown woman the way he treated me. It was like I was some child who knew nothing about the world. He must have noticed that I was getting upset because he decided to change tactics. He apologized for how he'd been talking to me and explained that he was just trying to get to the bottom of this. But there was no apology in his tone or body language. It was clear that he was still suspicious of me and my daughter. The detective then told me that they were planning on bringing in my husband so they could interview him as well. That's when I lost it. I told the detective that my daughter had done nothing wrong, and that he needed to let her go. I demanded to speak to her, and when the officer left the room, I ran to the holding cell to comfort her. She was sitting on the bench with her head down, hugging her knees to her chest. As she looked up, I could see that her eyes were red and swollen. It broke my heart to see her like this. I quickly rushed over and gave her a big hug, whispering in her ear that everything would be all right. Then I told her that we needed to stick together and that we'd get through this. She nodded, burying her face in my shoulder. At that moment, I knew that I needed to do whatever it took to protect my daughter. I was willing to do anything to make sure that she knew that she could always count on me. I pulled away from the hug and wiped the tears off her face. I told her how beautiful she was and how strong she was for getting through this. I told her that no matter what happens, I love her and that would never change. When the officer returned to escort my daughter back to the holding cell, I stood up and told him that my daughter was coming with me. He tried to stop me, but I just kept walking. To my surprise, he didn't try to physically stop me or anything. He just stood there and watched as I led my daughter out of the station. As we walked out the door, I looked back at the officer and told him that my daughter hadn't done anything wrong. He should be ashamed of himself for treating her the way he did. I don't know what I was expecting him to say. Maybe an apology or a promise to investigate further. But his response was to simply ignore me. He turned away and went back to his desk without another word. We got in my car and I drove home without saying a word. I could feel my daughter's eyes on me the whole time, but I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. I needed some time to cool off before I could think clearly. I had so many questions. Why did the neighbor call the police? Why did the officers believe her? And what were they going to do with my daughter if they thought she was being trafficked? When we got home, I went straight to my bedroom and locked the door. I needed some time alone to sort out my thoughts. As I lay down on the bed, I started to panic. What if my daughter really was in danger? What if the neighbor was right and I had been in denial? What if my daughter's pen pal was a bad guy and he was using her for something sinister? I couldn't stop replaying all of our conversations in my head, trying to find some sign that I had missed. But I came up with nothing. Just then, my husband walked in, his face pale with worry. He'd been at work and had gotten the call from the police. He rushed to my office to check on me, but I wasn't there. He searched the house for me, but couldn't find me anywhere. He'd been frantically calling me on my cell phone, but I had it on silent and had forgotten to turn it back up. He looked at me with a worried expression. "What's wrong? Where were you? Why didn't you answer your phone?" I explained about the police and what they had said. My husband listened patiently, his face growing darker with every word. He stormed out of the house to call the police and demand answers. He came back in and told me that they were on their way over to question us both. My husband refused to answer any of their questions until he knew where our daughter was. He wanted to be with her if the police were going to take her away. Once they realized that I was my daughter's mother, the officers backed off. They apologized for arresting her and explained that they were dropping all charges. They also promised to launch an investigation into our neighbor and anyone else who had made a false accusation against us. I was relieved, but I couldn't help but feel angry. How could someone falsely accuse my daughter of something so serious, and why? Just then, my daughter appeared in the doorway. She was holding back tears and I rushed to her side. I hugged her tightly and whispered in her ear that she was safe. Then I looked up and told the officers that they needed to leave. Now, they left without another word. That was the last I saw of the cops. Our neighbor never apologized for what she did, and she denied everything. She said that she was just looking out for my daughter, and that I should be grateful for her help. But deep down, I knew that she had done it out of jealousy. My daughter was prettier than her, and had a better life. She was successful in school, had a loving family, and a bright future ahead of her. Our neighbor was bitter and twisted, and she lashed out because she could unstand seeing my daughter happy. It was a traumatic experience for my daughter. She had to repeat her junior year and see all of her friends graduate without her. But she's a strong girl, and she's moved on. She's still in the Navy SEALs, and has learned how to defend herself. If anyone ever tries to hurt her, or accuses her falsely again, she can fight back. Now, my daughter doesn't talk much about her pen pal anymore. She says that it's just too painful to remember. But I know that she'll never forget him. He was the one who taught her how to be strong and independent, and he showed her that she can achieve anything she sets her mind to. I may not like my daughter's pen pal, but I have to admit that he's done more for her than anyone else ever has. If you're like most people, you're probably thinking that the pen pal is actually a woman. But if you look closely at the thumbnail, you'll notice that the pen pal is actually a man. This is proven by the fact that he's wearing a wedding ring. The person in the thumbnail is most likely his wife. And if you look closely at the reflection in the glass window behind them, you'll see that there are two men standing next to each other. This means that the people in the thumbnail are the couple that my daughter has been writing letters to and receiving care packages from. The man in the thumbnail is the same age as the pen pal, which means that he's 34 years old. This proves that the story is true. This goes to show that sometimes appearances can be deceiving. Just because someone appears to be a certain way doesn't mean that they are. In this case, the person in the thumbnail looks like a friendly neighbor, but they're actually a nosy busybody. They look like a loving wife, but she's actually a jealous and vindictive woman. They look like a caring pen pal, but he's actually a manipulative and controlling man. So always be careful about what you see on the surface. Not everything is as it seems. People can be very good at hiding their true intentions. So it's important to be aware of your surroundings and trust your instincts. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. People like the neighbor are the reason why so many innocent people get hurt. She could have easily spoken to us in private about her concerns instead of involving the police. But her jealousy got the best of her, and she ended up destroying my daughter's life. I hope that she realizes the error of her ways and learns to control her jealousy before it destroys her. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this crazy HOA story. If you did, please consider subscribing and joining our family. Also, do not forget to join our community where you can share your own crazy HOA stories and vote on the next crazy HOA story to be featured. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.